Okay, let us hope we have this figured out. So, this is Technique Tuesday. This is going to be the intro video for bass, and I'm also going to be talking a little bit about reading music. It is one of the first important skills and techniques to develop to be able to read different forms of written music and also be able to translate whatever you're reading onto your instrument in real time. And that does take some practice and some time. But if you learn this way, this can start you off on a really good path. So, the first thing to talk about when reading music is kind of the musical staff, which is what we call these five horizontal lines that repeat over and over again on our sheets of music here. The lines that run vertically are either end lines or in the ones in the middle are called measure lines. And the symbols that are on the left, for example, right here, those are called clefs. And we have many different kinds of clefs in music, but the two most common and most popular are the treble clef and the bass clef. The treble clef is the clef that's on the top, and the bass clef is the one that's on the bottom. Typically, the only instrument that has to read both at the same time is piano, and in that case, normally the treble clef or the top line is played with the right hand, while the bass clef is played with the left hand. Um, but other instruments can venture into the other clefs, like the bass could venture into the treble clef if it starts playing notes that are high enough, because the bass clef is more utilized for the lower pitched notes in music, where the treble clef is for the higher notes. And many other instruments can sometimes change clefs um, or use different clefs in the music. So that can be a little difficult because the treble clef and the bass clef are set up slightly differently. So the easiest and quickest way to learn the notes, I believe, is by learning these few acronyms. So we kind of divide up the notes from lines and spaces. So in the treble clef, you can see in the top line, in this first measure here, this is showing all of the notes that are fall on the lines of the treble clef. And for those notes there, we have five of them. We use the acronym Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge. And each of those words, the first letter is the note name. So we have E, G, B, D, and F. And then in the next measure, we have the notes that fall in the spaces. And for that, we use the word face for the treble clef. So we have F, A, C, and E. In the bass clef, it is very similar, but slightly different. Um, Instead of starting with every, we start with good. So we have good boys deserve fudge always for the lines, and then all cows eat grass for the spaces. So we have G, B, D, F, and A for the lines, and A, C, E, and G for the spaces. The next thing to look at is what we call ledger lines. So we use ledger lines to kind of extend the staff, the grand staff, which makes the grand staff is the combination of treble and bass clef there. But for the treble clef, you can see how our lowest note that falls on the lines is E, but there are plenty more notes below it that just follow our musical alphabet: E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E as they descend. And we add ledger lines to indicate that we're getting lower and lower in pitch in that case. Also, at the top of the treble clef, we also have the highest note being F, and that ascends the musical alphabet. So we have F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and this can keep going, but when we get up to this amount of ledger lines, what we do normally, if we have to go even higher or even lower, we use I think they call it an octave marking. That is probably wrong, but there's probably a technical term for it. But basically, 8VA means play an octave above written, and 8VB means play an octave below written. So that can extend our staff even more. But then for the bass clef, our lowest note that falls on the lines is G, and you just keep on going down the alphabet as you add more ledger lines. G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G. And then for the top of the bass clef, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There is a midpoint between the treble and the bass clefs. I forgot to write a treble and a bass clef right there, but the midpoint is middle C. And you can see that it can be written with a stem pointed upwards or downwards. And that's just kind of indicating that that is exactly where C sits between the bass clef and the treble clef. So C is kind of the midpoint. And it's also when, if you're playing a piece of music and you kind of cross below or above middle C, like if I'm in the treble clef and I'm going many notes below this middle C here, then I might consider switching into bass clef if I'm writing the music. Whereas, like, if I'm playing bass and I start getting into the higher notes and going above middle C, that might be a time, if I'm playing for a longer passage or a longer period of time up in those notes, I might change the bass part to be written in the treble clef just to make it more visually easier to read. Then, just to mention, there are many instruments that are considered transposed instruments, which means that what is written is not actually the note that is played. So, instruments like horns, like the saxophone, the trumpet, the clarinet, the French horn, all of those have different transposed tunings. So, for example, the trumpet is a B flat instrument, meaning when they read the note C and they play it on their trumpet, it's actually a B flat. So it's a half step below what a concert pitched instrument, which is standard, like a piano or, piano, what the piano would play. So guitar is one of the actually weirder ones, where guitar is written one octave above its actual pitch. So if we were to read a middle C and play it on the guitar, that would actually be, the guitar would be playing a C3 instead of a C4. But we write it as a C4 because we would have to read so many ledger lines if we didn't. So guitar is kind of a weird one with that, but it doesn't really affect very much as a guitar player trying to read music at all. It can get weird when you're trying to transpose music between, say, a alto saxophone part that's in E flat in back, and you're trying to play it with a concert instrument. That requires active transposition of the music in your head. So there are some instances where communication between people that are playing these different instruments with different transposed tunings and things can get a little confusing. But once you know the rules, it's not too bad. The next thing to talk about is kind of all of our different rhythms. So going from left to right, the circle with nothing filled in and no stem, that is a whole note that normally gets full 4 counts or 4 beats, but it does depend on the time signature. So if the time signature, we'll talk about time signatures in a second, but if the time signature does not have 4 beats in a measure and it's maybe 6, a whole note is probably going to be worth 6. Um, there might maybe you write a dotted whole note or something, but I don't know. Um, I I guess that's what you do. It gets kind of interesting, but basically, whole note, you hold the note for the whole measure. Okay, then half note is worth 2 beats. A quarter note is worth 1 beat. An eighth note is worth a half a beat. And when we get into half beats, normally we count it as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So those ands are all the eighth notes. And those are the off beats that we have in a measure. Then one of the faster rhythmic values that we have are 16th notes. So that's the one with the 2 flags there. Then we have rests that are worth kind of the same value and they match up. So we have a whole rest, a half rest. The whole rest is for a whole measure, typically 4 beats. Half rest, 2 beats. Quarter rest, 1 beat. Eighth rest, half beat. 16th rest, quarter of a beat. And the last thing that we find in almost all music are time signatures. So in a time signature, this is usually written at the top left of a piece of music. The top number in a time signature tells how many beats there are in one measure, where the bottom number tells us what value note gets 1 beat. And a nice little trick for figuring out what value note gets 1 beat is to take the bottom number and put it into a fraction 1 over x, whatever your bottom number of your time signature is. And that is what kind of tells you the type of note that you would have as the note that is worth 1 beat. So for a time signature of 4/4, it's a quarter note, and you can see that with the fraction. The last thing, correction, is dynamics. So dynamic markings can be found all over music. The quietest and dynamics are referring to loudness. So the quietest being pianissimo. That's 3 P's over there. Pianissimo, 2 P's. Piano, 1 P. Mezzo piano, mezzo forte. Mezzo from Italian, meaning like medium, medium quiet, medium loud. Forte, loud, fortissimo, and fortissimo, or whatever. And then just the last 2 markings over there are a crescendo and a decrescendo. The crescendo is when we increase in volume, and that's usually found written right below whatever you're reading in your music. And decrescendo is to go from louder to quieter. So those are just most, I guess, of the things that you might run into as you're starting to try to read music. The only thing that I didn't cover is kind of some of the navigational things that you have to know in order to read some sheet music, such as first and second endings, codas, and yeah, just some other random navigational things that you have to know to get through a piece of music. But that is something that you'll learn along the way. So I'm just going to switch over to the bass here. Oh gosh. Okay. Gotta sneak in here. Oh my gosh. All right. So yeah, this is my bass. Bass is a great instrument because, gosh, it rules. It rules the band. Bassists never get enough credit. Um, they have such an important job, and they can be such a kind of make or break piece to any group of musicians playing together because they have so much control over the rhythm and the harmony and the background of any moment in any piece of music. Um, Chords in music are defined by the bass note, so the root note, the third, and the seventh. But the most important is for sure the root. And the bass is responsible a lot of times for just providing a foundation and clarity to the listener about what the root is. Um, in my next piano video, we're going to be getting into inversions, talking about inversions. And you'll learn that there's multiple ways to play the same chord or the same group of notes. And depending on which way you play it, it can become unclear what the root is. And the more complex your harmony gets, the more unclear it can potentially become. So the bass has a key role in defining what is happening in a given musical moment. And their taste, their selection of notes, and the groove that they can provide to a rhythm section, and the way that they work with a drummer in providing the groove of a song is really special. When you run into a band that has great chemistry between the bassist and the drummer, that can be some of my favorite music to watch because I love when they're so locked in to a groove. But some cool things about the bass: 4 strings, not 6. That's nice. And they're all tuned to perfect fourths, so the symmetry in the bass is phenomenal. Uh, the scale shapes, the ways that you can play triads and chords, it's all very repeatable, um, even more so than the guitar. So the once you learn the patterns for the bass, um, or in my case, you just learn the guitar and then get a bass. It is not. It's one of the less confusing patternistically. Um, One of the less confusing instruments patternistically that you can learn. That does not mean that bass is not hard. Bass is very hard. It's very hard to be very good at bass. There's a lot of touch, I think, that goes into bass. And a lot of it has to do with your right hand technique, which is typically the strumming hand on a guitar. With the bass, it's not really so much a strum as usually a pluck with your fingers. Something like that. So, you can use a pick with a bass, and that is common in some genres of music, especially like if you were to do a Green Day cover band or some heavier rock or metal or fusion, really fast paced stuff. You might see a lot of pick use. But there is a lot of beauty, I guess, in being in playing with your hands and connecting to an instrument with the thick strings and everything. It really feels like you can connect with the bass um, vibrationally almost. It's definitely an instrument that like can ring through your whole body, which is pretty cool. Um, One of my favorite things on the bass, like no other instrument can do, is using spread voice triads, and that's just a way of playing chords on the bass without um, running into what we call low interval limits, or Berkeley LILs. It was my nightmare in arranging classes, trying to avoid low interval limits while writing music. But these spread voice triads are gorgeous. Like, come on, it's awesome. Um, so it, uh, there is plenty that you can do on the bass that is not just, oh, I'm gonna play my roots and that's all I ever do. There's slap bass. There's all kinds of harmonics you can get into when you really learn the harmonic series well, and the bass is a phenomenal instrument for being able to play harmonics. There's 5 string and 6 string basses. There's different tunings on the bass, just like there is with guitar. There's upright versus electric. I don't have an upright. I don't really want one. They're a little too big to do much of anything with. Um, but yeah, there's acoustic basses. Um, I'm probably forgetting something else, but they can go into an amplifier and pedals just like a guitar can. So really, sonically, you can do a whole ton with bass. That is not just your typical bassist role, I guess you could say. But it's a really great instrument. It's great to learn the bass clef, no matter what instrument you might play primarily. Um, it's great to play an instrument like the bass that sits in that low register. I really love the lower notes of the bass and the way it can really fill up a room, fill up your whole body. And it's a really great instrument. I love writing bass lines and stuff. I find it a little easier to write on than guitar sometimes because there's more limitations almost. Um, and that can be really interesting. But yeah, I guess that's a little bit of an overview. Still has all the same type of parts or sections to it as a guitar. Like this is considered the body. We have the neck, the head or the headstock, tuning keys just like a guitar, pickups just like a guitar, a bridge just like a guitar, um, input jack, which is a guitar. So it's very similar, very similar. And actually, all the dots on the frets are the exact same as they are on guitar, so that doesn't change at all. The notes that are the open string notes are E, A, D, and G, which are the bottom four strings or lowest four strings on the lowest pitched strings on the guitar. So if you do learn guitar, congratulations, you've kind of learned how to play the bass. So it is a very accessible instrument, but it also, there's a lot of depth to the bass that sometimes doesn't get noticed or talked about very much. But it's a phenomenal instrument to learn. And I enjoy teaching it. So that's it for this week. Next week we're gonna be talking drums. It's cool.